Now this is a case that hits me close to home. Being from Scotland myself, as a kid I can briefly remember the wave of fear that sent across the whole country. This really had people scared to let their children out at night. Peter Tobin is a name that a lot of people across Scotland will be familiar with. Born 27th of August 1946 in a small town called Johnston in the county of Renfrewshire. It is fairly close to the more recognisable name of Glasgow, so you have a rough idea of where it is. Tobin was one of 8 siblings, 4 older sisters and 3 older brothers. He was the littlest of the pack, but he'd caused the biggest problems amongst them. A bad egg is putting it lightly. In 1953, aged just 7, he was sent away to an approved school. Now this is basically a youth detention centre, jail type thing I guess. Children were sent here when kids done stuff so bad that it was out of the parents' control. So some really nasty ass shit. Because let's be honest, when your parents are mad they can unleash a whole can of pain on your ass real fast. He then joined the French Foreign Legion, which is a branch of the French army, established in 1831, which members are highly skilled. So I'm not sure really who, why, what or where he ended up as a member, but it didn't last long. He deserted, which means to leave your post without permission. A youth detention centre was next for Tobin, which was known as a borstal back in the day. You can already tell that he was already a problem to society. 1970 would be the first of Tobin's official prison stints. The then just 17-year-old Tobin served time for burglary and forgery. They should have just locked him up and threw away the key back then. Now in between his sprees of causing havoc and getting locked up, he would end up moving to good old Brighton in England. This is where he married his then 17-year-old girlfriend, Margaret Mountney. And I'm not even sure it's legal to get married at 17, but if it's not, it probably should be. And what do you know? Their marriage went up shit creek pretty fast. They separated after just a year and she divorced him in 1971, and that is probably why he shouldn't marry at 17. Tobin, however, wasted no time and in 1973 was married again, this time to a local nurse, 30-year-old Sylvia Jeffries. The pair ended up having 2 children together, a son and a daughter. Their daughter died shortly after birth, however. This marriage lasted longer than the first one, 3 years this time round until 1976, ending when Sylvia said fuck this, I'm out, and left with their son. Tobin let the dust settle a bit longer this time after his last merry-go-round, and waited until 1987 to marry again, this time to Kathy Wilson. A son arrived later that same year. Honeymoon sex must have been hitting different. Long behold, this marriage had the same doomed fate as the previous first 2. Wilson left Tobin in 1990 and moved back to Portsmouth, England, where she had grown up. Tobin then moved to Havant, Hampshire, in 1993. All 3 of his exes gave the same similar accounts, that of a charming, well-dressed psychopath, who would often turn violent and displayed sadistic streaks at times. It's from here that the crimes of Tobin changed from petty to the more sadistic side that all 3 of his wives mentioned. On the 4th of August 1993, Tobin held 2 14-year-old girls at knife point at his flat in Leigh Park. The pair went to visit a neighbour who was not home. They stopped at Tobin's flat and asked if they could wait there. At knife point, he forced them to drink cider and vodka. He then sexually assaulted and raped the girls, as well as stabbing one of them, all while his younger son was present. A sadistic side is an understatement. Tobin left them for dead, turning on the gas taps in his flat then leaving them there, but they both survived the attack. He then went on the run, fleeing to avoid arrest. Tobin joined the Jesus Fellowship, a religious sect in Coventry, which he had joined under a false name. He, however, wasn't the best at playing hide and seek. He was later captured in Brighton after his blue Austin Metro car was found there. And don't worry, I have never heard of an Austin Metro until now either. Tobin was brought to trial on the 18th of May 1994 at Winchester Crown Court. He pleaded guilty, and this right here is why the whole UK system is in the mud. He received just 14 years. The legal system in the UK needs a long hard look at itself. Paedophiles like Tobin, who abuse these 14-year-old girls, are let off with a slap on the wrist, which gives them the chance to re-offend, and re-offend he did. Tobin was released in 2004, aged 58. Tobin wasn't Tobin anymore, he was now Pat McLaughlin, and this was to avoid detection on the Violent Sex Offender Register. If you're on that register, then you shouldn't be out in public, period. Working as a handyman at St Patrick's Church in Anderson, Glasgow, he met then 23-year-old Angelika Kluk. Angelika was staying at the living quarter of St Patrick's Church. She worked as a cleaner. Now this was to help her finance her Scandinavian Studies course at her university. Angelika was last seen alive on the 24th of September 2006 with the company of Pat McLaughlin, or violent and registered sex offender Peter Tobin. Tobin attacked her in the garage attached to the living quarters. She was beaten, raped and stabbed, then concealed under the floorboards. Worst of all, it's believed that she was still alive when she was buried. All kinds of sick. Police began looking for missing Angelika. They discovered her body under the confessional area of the church on the 29th of September 2006. Tobin was caught in London shortly after, in a hospital, under a false name and with a fictitious complaint. A 6-week trial resulted from the evidence that was gathered. The trial took place at the High Court of Justiciary in Edinburgh between 23rd of March and the 4th of May 2007. He was found guilty of raping and murdering Kluk and was sentenced to life imprisonment to serve a minimum of 21 years. Which really isn't life though, is it? A man who raped 2 children as well as raping another woman then killing her could be released by the time he's dead. Someone who's done shit like this should never have the potential to see outside a jail cell again. This, however, was only the tip of the iceberg. Vicky Hamilton was a 15-year-old girl. She was visiting her older sister Sharon Brown on a snowy, chilly evening. She jumped on the bus that was headed to the nearby town of Bathgate. This was the first of 2 buses back to her mother's house, 50 miles away in Reading. Vicky, however, did not make it home. She got lost, making the jump to the second bus from Bathgate town centre. She approached several people while trying to find the right bus stop to take her home. One of these people would be Peter Tobin. Police searched Tobin's old house in Bathgate in connection with the disappearance of Vicky Hamilton. A few weeks after her disappearance, Tobin is believed to have left Bathgate for Margate. This resulted in a forensic search at the property in Margate too. Human remains were found as a result of the forensic search in the back garden of 50 Irvine Drive. On the 14th of November 2007, Lothian and Borders Police confirmed that they were those of Hamilton. The case was solved 16 years after her disappearance and 500 miles away from her last sighting. After a month-long trial, Tobin was convicted of Hamilton's murder on the 2nd of December 2008. He was really sentenced to life inside this time. Dinah McNichol, an 18-year-old from Tillingham, Essex, was last seen alive on the 5th of August 1991, hitchhiking home from a male friend from a music festival in Liphook, Hampshire. While hitchhiking, they accepted a ride home. Her friend was dropped off on the M25, while McNichol stayed in the car with the driver. She was never seen again. In late 2007, Essex police reopened the investigation into McNichol's disappearance, following new leads. A second body was found at 50 Irvine Drive in Margate, later confirmed by police to be that of McNichol. Both Dinah's and Vicky's bodies were found in a 6-foot sand pit in Tobin's back garden, which neighbours assumed was for his younger son. The trial for the murder of Dinah McNichol began in June 2009, but was postponed after the judge ruled that Tobin was not fit to stand, pending surgery. The case resumed on the 14th of December 2009 at Chelmsford Crown Court. On the 16th of December, after the defence had offered no evidence, a jury found Tobin guilty of McNichol's murder. They deliberated for less than 15 minutes. This resulted in Tobin receiving his 3rd life sentence. Now that wraps up the 3 confirmed cases of murder. However, the number may be far more. Many people believe that Peter Tobin has the potential to be Bible John, and as I say, if the shoe fits. Bible John was a serial killer who murdered 3 young women in Glasgow in the 1960s, and the similarities between Tobin and John are so glaring you may ask, how in the fuck has he not been convicted of them? The photograph of Tobin from that era is scarily similar to the photo fit artist's impression of John. Tobin left Glasgow in 1969, the same year the killings ended. Eyewitnesses told police that the suspect, Bible John, had 1 tooth missing up in his upper right area of the mouth. Dental records prove that Tobin too had a tooth removed around the late 1960s. Like I said, if the shoe fits. That is the life and crimes of Peter Tobin. Crimes as heinous and sadistic as his are still unrivaled to this day, and many regard him as the UK's worst serial killer. I'm just glad that this man is off the streets for good this time, and that he'll die in jail. Take care. See you in the next one.